A tanto is one of the traditionally made Japanese swords that were worn by the samurai class of feudal Japan. The tanto dates to the Heian period, when it was mainly used as a weapon but evolved in design over the years to become more ornate. Tanto were used in traditional martial arts and saw a resurgence of use in the West in the 1980s as the design made its way to the US and is a common blade pattern found in modern tactical knives. Description: the tanto is commonly referred to as a knife or dagger. The blade is single or double-edged with a length between 15 and 30 centimeters. The tanto was designed primarily as a stabbing weapon, but the edge can be used for slashing as well. Tanto are generally forged in hara-zukuri style, meaning that the sides have no ridgeline and are nearly flat. Unlike the shinaji-zukuri structure of a katana, some tanto have particularly thick cross-sections for armor-piercing duty, and are called yorwatoshi. Tanto were mostly carried by samurai, as commoners did not generally wear them. Women sometimes carried a small tanto called a kaikan in their obi, primarily for self-defense. Tanto were sometimes worn as the shoto in place of a wakizashi in a daisho, especially on the battlefield. Before the advent of the wakizashi-tanto combination, it was common for a samurai to carry a tachi and a tanto as opposed to a katana and a wakizashi. It has been noted that the tachi would be paired with a tanto and later the uchigatana would be paired with another shorter uchigatana. With the advent of the katana, the wakizashi eventually was chosen by samurai as the short sword over the tanto. Kanzan Sato in his book The Japanese Sword notes that there did not seem to be any particular need for the wakizashi and suggests that the wakizashi may have become more popular than the tanto due to the wakizashi being more suited for indoor fighting. He mentions the custom of leaving the katana at the door of a castle or palace when entering while continuing to wear the wakizashi inside. History of Tanto in Japan. The production of swords in Japan is divided into specific time periods: Jokoto, Goto, Shinto, Shinto, Genda Ito, Shinsakuto, Heian to Muromachi. The tanto was invented partway through the Heian period. With the beginning of the Kamakura period, tanto were forged to be more aesthetically pleasing, and Hira and Uchi-sari tanto becoming the most popular styles. Near the middle of the Kamakura period, more tanto artisans were seen, increasing the abundance of the weapon, and the kanmuri otoshi style became prevalent in the cities of Kyoto and Yamato. Because of the style introduced by the Tachi in the late Kamakura period, tanto began to be forged longer and wider. The introduction of the Hoshiman faith became visible in the carvings in the hilts around this time. The hamon is similar to that of the Tachi, except for the absence of chojimade, which is Enio Ionotsuri. Yanomimade and Segura are found to have taken its place. During the era of the northern and southern courts, the tanto were forged to be up to 40 centimeters as opposed to the normal 1 shaku length. The blades became thinner between the uri and the omote, and wider between the hara and mune. At this point in time, two styles of hamon were prevalent: the older style, which was subtle and artistic, and the newer, more popular style. With the beginning of the Muromachi period, constant fighting caused the mass production of blades, meaning that with higher demand, lower quality blades were manufactured. Blades that were custom forged still were of exceptional quality, but the average blade suffered greatly. As the end of the period neared, the average blade narrowed and the curvature shallowed. Momoyama to the early Edo period. Approximately 250 years of peace accompanied the unification of Japan. in which there was little need for blades. With weaponsmiths given this time, both the katana and wakizashi were invented, taking the place of the Tanto and Tachi as the most used pair of weapons, and the number of Tanto forged was severely decreased. The only Tanto produced during this period of peace were copies of others from earlier eras. Late Edo period. There were still few Tanto being forged during this period, and the ones that were forged reflected the work of the Kamakura, Nambo Kacho, or Muromachi eras. Suishin Shimasahide was a main contributor towards the forging of Tanto during this age. There are now only prehistoric Tanto being used in combat. Meiji to present. Many Tanto were forged before World War II, due to the restoration of the emperor to power. Members of the imperial court began wearing the set of Tachi and Tanto once more, and the number of Tanto in existence increased dramatically. After World War II, a restriction on sword forging caused Tanto manufacture to fall very low. American and European interest in Japanese martial arts since the war created a demand for the Tanto outside Japan from the 1960s through the present time. Types of Tanto. Blade types. Shinogi. This is the most common type of blade geometry for long swords, but Tanto made in this form are very rare, usually created from cut-down blades when a longer sword has been broken. Shinogi means the central ridge that runs along the length of the blade between the edge bevels and the body of the blade. Hira. A very common Tanto form with no shinogi, the edge bevels reaching all the way from the edge to the back with no separate flats in between, creating an almost triangular cross-section. It is extremely common due to the simplicity of its design. Shobu. A common blade type that is very similar to the Shinogi Zukuri, except that it lacks a yokote, the distinct angle between the long cutting edge and the point section, and instead the edge curves smoothly and uninterrupted into the point. Kanmuri Otoshi. These Tanto were shaped in Hira a Shobu style, but from about halfway to the tip the back edge was sharpened, though this second edge was not particularly sharp. They had a groove running halfway up the blade and were similar to the Unok-ubi style Tanto. Unok-ubi, an uncommon Tanto style akin to the Kanmuri Otoshi, with a back that grows abruptly thinner around the middle of the blade. But in the Unok-ubi Zukuri it regains its thickness just before the point. There is normally a short, wide groove extending to the midway point on the blade. Kisaki Maru, a rare blade type with a double-edged point. Unlike the later Kanmuri Otoshi, the tip had a distinct shape unlike any other Tanto. The back edge would curve slightly downwards so that the point was lower than the back of the blade, whereas other Tanto had the point in line with the back of the blade. Often they had a wide groove in the base half. The most well-known historical blade of this type is the Tachi Kogarasu Maru, Little Crow, one of the national treasures of Japan. Osaraku Zukuri features an extremely long okisaki type point over half the blade's length. Hokigata, a Tanto form that is commonly described as a short, wide Hira. The Hokigata was one of the blade type that the legendary swordsmith Masamune favored. Katakiriha, an asymmetric Tanto form, sharpened only on one side to create a chisel-shaped cross-section. Maru, a rare, double-edged Tanto type that has a diamond-shaped cross-section. The blade tapers to a point and contains a shinogi that runs to the point. Kubikiri, a very rare type. The sharpened blade is on the inside curve rather than the outside. It has no sharpened point, making it difficult difficult to use in battle and enshrouding the weapon in mystery. Kubikiri can be roughly translated to head cutter. According to one myth, they were carried by attendants of samurai for cutting off the heads of fallen enemies. There are other speculations existing about the kubikiri's possible uses. Perhaps they were used by doctors or carried by high-ranking officials as a badges worn today. They could also have been used for cutting charcoal or incense, or used as an artistic tool for pruning bonsai trees. Yorwatoshi or Yorwadoshi, Tanto that have particularly thick cross-sections for armor-piercing duty. Mounting Ikuchi. The ikuchi is a Tanto koshiri where the fuchi is flush with the mouth of the sheath. There is no handguard. Ikuchi normally have planed wooden hilts, and many forms of ikuchi have kashira that are made from animal horns. Hamidashi. The hamidashi is a Tanto koshiri that features a small handguard. Other Tanto Kaiken Tanto. The Kaiken is a generally short Tanto that is commonly carried in ikuchi or shirasawa mounts. It was useful for self-defense indoors where the long katana and intermediate wakizashi were inconvenient. Women carried them in the obi for self-defense and rarely for jigai. A woman received a kaiken as part of her wedding gifts. Fan-tanto. The fan-tanto is a common tanto with a blade entirely concealed within a fan-shaped scabbard. The blade was usually low quality, as this tanto was not designed to be a display piece, but rather a concealed weapon for self-defense. Yari-tanto. Japanese spearheads were often altered so that it became possible to mount them as tanto. Unlike most blades, yari-tanto had triangular cross-sections. Ken-tanto. This is also not truly a tanto, though it is often used and thought of as one. Ken were straight, double-edged blades often used for Buddhist rituals, and could be made from spearheads that were broken or cut shorter. They were often given as offerings from swordsmiths when they visited a temple. The hilt of the ken-tanto may be found made with a vajra. Modern tanto. Modern tactical knives have been made by knife makers Bob Blum, Phil Hartsfield, Ernest Emerson, Alan Elishowitz, Bob Terzuola, Strider Knives, Harold J. Kit Carson, Benchmade, Spyderco, Severtech, Ka-Bar, SOG knives, and Cold Steel. These American tanto designs feature a thick spine on the blade that goes from the tang to the tip for increased tip strength. The handle shape may be altered slightly to provide better ergonomics. Use in martial arts. Tanto with blunt wooden or blunt plastic blades are used to practice martial arts. Versions with a blunt metal blade are used in more advanced training and in demonstrations. Martial arts that employ the tanto include